This is the downside, I think, of genre fiction, is because you do fall into these traps, you know. Are there any particular ones that you see, not of course in your own work, but in others that are like, wow, are they still getting away with this stuff?
Well, most detective or police novels follow this formula, and I mean, you have to go back to Sam Spade and all these old characters to find the inspiration, which leads back to what I said previously, that I could not invent a hero who is a single alcoholic detective. It is turning into a cliche. When I created my hero for Relic, the Dan Brown thing, at first I tried to make him blind, because I thought that was a great idea. Of course it didn't work.
You like a challenge, don't you? There's going to be no crime in my crime book, and the protagonist is going to be blind. This is going to be great.
In another book with the same character, I have him break his leg in the middle of the book, so that for the rest of the novel he has to use crutches. And that was just to torment myself.
Yeah, that picked up the pace considerably. Yeah.
How do I make a character move through a novel, half a novel, on crutches? That was kind of fun. But what I did when I created him, okay, I did not want him to be an alcoholic. I did not want him to be all these kinds of things. So I ended up making him an albino. It's an interesting handicap, because it doesn't really, you get problems with the sun.
It's hard to hide him in the room.
But it makes him interesting to write about, because it also, of course, it also gives him an aspect, the aspect of being the outsider, being different, being so his handicap, although it is not as dramatic as being blind, gives him a personality. Yes, and he has a lot of nerves. He's been hospitalized because of depressions. So he's in fact a very anti-hero, as opposed to the superstars in James Bond and Indiana Jones and those kinds. But it makes him fascinating for me to work with, because he has all these aspects. And also, he is an archaeologist. I mean, my main investigator is an archaeologist, which to most people is not so very sexy either. But it gives me, as the writer, so many challenges, and I love them. And well, the books sell well, so I think something right.
Now, was your interest in genre fiction, did you have an interest in genre fiction before you started writing it, or did you just figure, well, like a lot of us do, this will sell, and I'll write this kind of book, or?
Well, I started in the 1960s, and I thought to myself, sitting in my cottage in the village of Portmark, this is going to sell. So I started writing. I started reading Sjöwall Wahlöö. That's how I learned to read. I mean, I thought that was normal books. You know, I didn't realize it was some kind of strange genre fiction with a new perspective. To me, it was good books, and I started writing the same kind of books when I was 8, and I read all the Nancy Drew books. I think there were about 60 at the time. I read all of those, and I started writing books about somebody called Annika, actually, even back then, in the late 1960s. And then I realized I couldn't live off to start out with, because I had a daughter when I was 20, and her name was then obviously also Annika. So then I started working as a journalist and learned the trade, and I got fascinated by the power that you can find in the media. I was a news editor at Channel 4. I was editor-in-chief over Morning Daily, and I realized the power that journalism has. And all my books are really about power and struggle for power. So that's the dynamo in the books.
And you had a reaction when this question first popped up.
No, obviously for me it had to be crime fiction.
And is crime fiction in Scandinavia, I know it's popular and selling well, what's the critical reaction? Because there is in this country, there is still somewhat of a stigma. We're kind of ghettoized if you write crime fiction, that, oh, it may be entertaining and it may be fun, but it's not literary fiction. You know, it's not as significant or as important. And I think I was making the observation in the green room earlier that I can even see in this festival in Litquake the inroads that genre fiction is making in the past few years, that there are many more practitioners that are being invited to participate in this festival, and it's not just poets and mainstream memoirists and things like that, but that crime fiction is, you know, obviously proving very, very popular. So in Scandinavia, is it the same thing there? That
It is the same thing. Maybe Tom can answer.
Well, I'm also a book critic with Norway's largest newspaper, which is a sort of, it's a popular newspaper, it's a tabloid, so of course it writes about crime because, or crime novels, because its readers appreciate crime novels, but where you will find this stigma will be in the more, the higher up literary magazines, where of course crime or genre fiction in general is not respected. You will have the least selling genre, poems, lyrics, will be the most respected, and then you have short stories, which is well respected, and then the literary novels. And then way down there you find genre fiction. But of course this thing is not mainstream, or it's not the general public. It's the elite, the literary elite of any country that defines these things. So, you know, audience at large buy the books they want, and for the time being, crime is extremely dominating in all of the Scandinavian and Nordic countries. When you see the bestseller lists, crime will be, you know, 5 of the top 10 novels will be crime. And it reflects, I think, some of the issues we have been discussing previously. And so, in a way, what the literary elite thinks is really not a big concern to us who write this stuff.
No, but in Sweden you do get reviews, and they are critics in Sweden. They do read crime novels, and if they're bad, they say they're bad, and if they're good, they say they're good. Not the nice magazines you're talking about, obviously, but normal papers usually review genre fiction in a quite good way.
Yeah, well, the same thing in Norway, because as critics, we try to read the novels as they are. In other words, you get a crime novel to review, and you do not read it as, is this similar to Jonathan Franzen or some hotshot literary writer? You read, is this a good crime story? Is it well plotted? Do I believe in it? Are the characters well defined? Is it logical? many crime novels have inbuilt flaws that is extremely annoying if things are not logical. When you review a crime book, Norwegian critics in the newspapers as opposed to the literary magazines quite simply ask, is this a good crime book? And so it will be well rewarded or criticized based on its own merits.
But in Scandinavia in general, we write a lot about authors. I mean, there's authors on front pages of magazines and papers and all the time. And since you mentioned I've done a book together with James Patterson, the American writer, and he was on the cover of some magazine, I think it was New York Times magazine, and I was the first author in 10 years they had on the cover. And it was because they had, we called him the industry or the factory or whatever, So that's the difference between